Hello, my name is Joseph Gar, and over the next few minutes, I'll be trying to persuade you to take action against one of the greatest problems facing our oceans, which is bottom trawling. I'll do this by breaking it down into 3 key points for you. Number 1 is the destruction to our ecosystem. There's a lot of destruction in the habitats, and this could lead to a decrease in the fish population, which in turn could lead to also economic problems for certain areas, that is. The second point is there's a lot of bycatch as well as emission release. There's an excessive amount of waste whenever the nets come through. They grab a lot of stuff. It's not always what they're aiming for, so they release a lot back, and it also tears up the bottom of the ocean, which in turn releases CO2, but I will touch on that later. The third point is alternatives and what you could do. There's many things that are being put into effect, such as safer fishery practices. It's pretty much localizing areas that the bottom trawling can be a part in, and then there's also conservation efforts you can take part in. Bottom trawling is the act of dragging a weighted net. A boat's moving, and it connects to a net with weights on the bottom, as you can see in the photo, and it's very hard to aim, and it's not specific for any, well, in a sense it is specific for certain areas, but when it's dragged through, it can catch anything. Let's say for the example of this presentation, you're going for shrimp. It could also pick up dolphins, whales, and even turtles, stuff like that. In the short term, it causes the physical loss of homes for many fish, such as coral reefs. It could tear it up, and that is not good for the fish because that is their homes. It also disrupts marine life, such as migrating fish that are coming through. It can catch them in their path, and they get really turned around after that, and sometimes just don't make it. In the long term, it leads to ocean acidification through the release of the carbon emissions, which I'll get to in the next slide. And it also creates a loss of ocean biodiversity when all the fish are getting ripped up, and there's the loss that they're already taking effect in the short term. Eventually, they're going to pick up the young ones. In that process, they die out, and then there isn't future generations. So on to bycatch and emissions. A bycatch statistic is roughly 25% of the world actually relies on bycatch, which does make it a valid point of we should continue doing it so there's food. However, at the same time, it's decreasing the amount of food for the future. The bycatch range from 80 to 90% of the harvest. This means that 80 to 90% of what they take on board, they're eventually putting it back out, and more often than not, it doesn't make it, sitting in the boat for that long before they can get it back out. For emissions, there's nearly 1 billion metric tons of carbon emissions produced by these boats. Insane number. This is on a comparative level with the aviation industry, just a little bit behind it, I want to say, as cited by one of my sources that I got this by. Where it goes, 40 to 45% goes back into the ocean, causing ocean acidification, which isn't good for future growth of seagrass, which is vital for vegetarian fish. 55 to 60 gets released into the air and doesn't really contain for the point of this presentation, but it is causing climate change issues, which I won't touch on. And for the third point, alternatives and what you can do. Some alternatives that are in effect is shrimp farms. It's typically for bait, but in Southeast Asia, which is actually where a lot of shrimp comes from that's frozen, they have shrimp farms where they just produce shrimp, and that's typical farms in the Midwest. There's also Danish and Scottish seaming, which is a way that they somehow capture these fish in a more humane way. Again, that was just one of my sources, and I thought it'd be interesting to point out. Some more alternatives are gill nets, which are nets that go through its sort of mid-trawling and catch fish, but it's mostly ones that have gills, so it's more specific for what they're aiming for. Also individual fishing, as I touched in my last presentation. There's also long lines, which is displayed in that photo right there, in which they just put bait, ton of hooks, and typically, more often than not, the fish you want, depending on the bait you use, will come and get it. There's Marine Conservation Institute, works to stop bottom trawling, and they typically do legislature where they try to get passed that will help the environment. And if you want to help, there's Marine Stewardship Council that you can make donations to, and they do the same thing where they go out and try to make a difference. So in conclusion, bottom trawling is not good for the environment at all, and there's plenty of alternatives out there, and it is bad for the economy. Now, while it is cheap, in the long term, it does cause a net negative. There's also social issues that come from it. An example of bottom trawling that went wrong was actually in Somalia. Before the pirates were there, this is actually the start of it, they didn't have a regulation on bottom trawling, and the people took arms to protect their own ocean. As you see, my sources are right there, and that will be the conclusion of my presentation. Have a good night.